Talk to yourself like this for 3 days and money must come. Neville Goddard. Neville Goddard taught that the words you speak to yourself in the secret room of your own mind are the most powerful currency you possess, more real than any coin, more binding than any signature, because they are spoken by the one power that creates all things, your own wonderful human imagination. There is a verse tucked into the 11th chapter of Mark that Neville returned to again and again, where it is written, "Whosoever shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe that those things which he saith shall come to pass, he shall have whatsoever he saith." And Neville read this not as a story about a hillside in a far country, but as a psychological drama happening inside you right now. The mountain is your problem, your lack, your empty account, and the mouth that speaks to it is your own self-talk, the quiet conversations you carry on inside your own head all day long. And here is the tender truth hidden in that verse. You already have whatsoever you say. You have been saying it your whole life. The only question is whether you have been saying poverty or saying plenty. Whether the mountain you have been addressing all these years has been growing taller under your own words, or whether today, finally, you turn and speak to it differently. So let us say together the truth of who you are before we go further. I am the awareness in which money appears. I am at rest in the feeling of having already received. Imagination creates my reality. Say it with me. I am the awareness in which money appears. I am at rest in the feeling of having already received. Imagination creates my reality. And again, slower this time, feeling every word. I am the awareness in which money appears. I am at rest in the feeling of having already received. Imagination creates my reality. Before we walk through these keys together, place the words, "It's done," in the comments below. Not as a wish, not as a hope, but as a declaration that something inside you has already shifted. Let those 2 words be your first act of faith today. Let them be the seal on a door that is now closing behind the old story and opening ahead of you onto the new one. The first key is, catch yourself in the act of cursing your own future, because most people never notice that every time they say, "I can't afford it," or "money is tight," or "I never have enough," they are not describing their life, they are legislating it. Neville taught that your own words are the wand of your imagination. And a wand does not describe, it commands. When you say, "I am broke," you are not reporting a fact, you are casting a spell upon your own tomorrow. And the tragedy is that this spell is cast so casually, in the checkout line when the total feels heavy, in the small laugh you give when a friend suggests a trip you tell yourself you cannot take, in the private sigh you breathe when the notification sound of a banking app makes your stomach tighten before you have even looked. None of these moments feel like prayer, and yet Neville insisted that this is exactly what prayer is. The assumption you carry while your attention is fixed upon a thing. So the very first thing you must do, before any technique, before any 3-day practice, is simply notice. Walk through your day like a quiet witness standing just behind your own shoulder, and catch the small confessions of lack that slip out of you without thought. The sigh when the bill comes, the joke about being poor, the complaint to a friend about how expensive everything has become. These are prayers, and they are being answered faithfully, on schedule, without fail. So for these 3 days, your first assignment is simple. Refuse to speak the old confession even once. When the old words rise in your throat, let them die there unspoken. Do not fight them. Do not argue with them. Simply decline to give them a voice. This alone will begin to loosen the mountain, because you cannot build a new house while you keep tearing down the walls with your own tongue. A builder does not lay new brick with one hand while swinging a hammer at the foundation with the other, and neither can you speak a new assumption of wealth while your habitual speech keeps confirming the old one. So today, simply watch, simply catch, simply refuse, and let that refusal be the quiet, unglamorous beginning of everything that follows. The second key is, replace the old confession with a new inner conversation, and speak it as though it were already true. Neville taught that we live far more inside our imaginary conversations than we realize. In the shower, driving to work, standing in line at the store, lying in bed waiting for sleep, we are constantly rehearsing conversations. And most people, without ever choosing to, rehearse the conversations of lack, imagining explaining to someone why they cannot do this or afford that, rehearsing the apology before it is ever needed, rehearsing the excuse before anyone has even asked. So for these 3 days, deliberately construct a different conversation and run it on repeat. Imagine a friend asking you how business is going, and hear yourself answer with quiet, warm confidence. Better than ever. The money keeps coming in such unexpected ways. Imagine someone asking how you paid off that debt so quickly, and hear yourself laughing softly, saying it just seemed to work itself out. Imagine a family member who once doubted you, now asking, almost puzzled, how everything turned around so quickly for you, and hear your own voice, unhurried, simply saying that you decided to see things differently and the rest followed. Hold these little imaginary scenes the way you would hold a cup of warm tea, gently, without straining, feeling the ease in your own voice, feeling the warmth in your own chest as you speak them. This is not fantasy for its own sake. This is deliberate revision of the self you have been assuming. Because the state you occupy in imagination is the state you will one day occupy in the flesh. Neville often said that imagination is the only redemptive power in the universe, and that whatever state you inhabit persistently in your inner conversations becomes the pattern your outer life must eventually follow. If you keep rehearsing lack, you keep signing the lease on lack, renewing it night after night without even reading the terms. But if you rehearse the feeling of money already arrived, already sufficient, already overflowing, you begin to sign a new lease, one written in the quiet language of ease rather than the anxious language of struggle. 3 days of this inner conversation, spoken silently or under your breath, in the car, in the shower, on a walk, will begin to feel less like pretending and more like remembering. And that shift, from pretending to remembering, is the whole secret. For the moment, an assumption stops feeling like performance and starts feeling like simple fact. It has already begun its long, quiet journey into your outer world. The third key is, understand why 3 days and why persistence is not begging but building. Neville often said that assumptions, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. And 3 days is not a magic number. It is simply enough time to move an idea from a visitor in your mind to a resident. Think of how a stranger becomes a friend. You do not become close after one meeting. You become close after returning to the same conversation, again and again, until familiarity turns to trust. And trust, once formed, no longer needs to be argued for. It simply is. It is the same with the assumption of wealth. The first time you say to yourself, "I am one who always has more than enough," some part of you may laugh quietly in disbelief. Some part of you may glance at the bank balance and scoff. That is fine. Let it laugh. Let it scoff. Do not punish that part of you or fight it. Simply continue. The second time you say it, the laughter is a little quieter. The scoffing has lost a little of its bite. By the third day, something in you has stopped arguing, and when the arguing stops, the assumption is left alone, undisturbed, to do its quiet work in the depths. This is why Neville spoke of persistence in the assumption as the mother of all miracles. Not one bold declaration followed by anxious watching. Not one dramatic affirmation shouted once and then abandoned the moment doubt creeps back, but a patient, daily, almost boring return to the same feeling. The feeling of security, the feeling of sufficiency, the feeling that the mountain has already been cast into the sea, and the sea has already closed calmly over it. Think of how a groove is worn into a path through a field, not by one person walking across it once, but by the same feet returning again and again, until the earth itself remembers the shape of the walking. Your consciousness works the very same way. So for these 3 days, choose a single sentence, something simple, something you can carry easily, such as, "Money comes to me easily and constantly," and speak it to yourself upon waking, before your feet even touch the floor. Speak it in the stillness of midday, perhaps while washing your hands or waiting for a kettle to boil. Speak it as you close your eyes at night, letting it be the very last thought you release into the dark, not shouting it, not straining after it, not gripping it as though it might slip away, just letting it rest on your lips, the way a lullaby rests on the lips of a mother, over and over, softly, until the child, which is your own outer life, finally falls asleep believing it, and stays asleep in that belief long enough for it to become true. The fourth key is, learn to live in the end, which Neville called the very heart of the whole teaching. Because it is one thing to say words about money, and another thing entirely to feel yourself already in the scene where the money has arrived. Imagine for a moment the letter has already come. The transfer has already cleared. The debt has already been paid in full. Do not imagine yourself hoping for this. Do not imagine yourself striving toward it. Imagine yourself relieved by it. Imagine the small physical sensations that would naturally accompany such relief. The loosening in your shoulders that you did not even know were tight. The easy breath that comes after a long-held one. The quiet smile you did not have to force onto your face because it simply arrived on its own. This is what it means to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Not to wish, but to feel as if the wishing is over. As if the story has already reached its happy ending, and you are simply now living in the calm afterward of it. Neville often used the example of a man dwelling in a poor house who begins to furnish, in imagination, the mansion he desires, walking through its rooms nightly, feeling the carpet under his feet, resting in its comfort, opening its windows in his mind, and feeling the air move through them, until one day the outer world simply catches up to the inner assumption, because the outer world has no choice. It must arrange itself according to the furniture already assumed within. So for these 3 days, before sleep, walk yourself gently through a scene of financial ease. Perhaps you are checking an account and seeing more than enough sitting there quietly. Perhaps you are handing someone a gift without a flicker of worry crossing your mind. Perhaps you are signing a receipt for something paid in full. Perhaps you are simply walking through your home, noticing that nothing here worries you anymore. Stay in that scene until it feels natural, not exciting, not thrilling, simply natural, the way your own name feels natural in your mouth, the way the taste of your own kitchen feels natural to you. Because excitement is often the mark of doubt still lingering underneath. The nervous energy of someone still convincing themselves, but calm familiarity is the mark of true assumption. The quiet, unremarkable ease of someone who has stopped negotiating with reality because they already live inside the answer. When you can imagine having money with the same quiet, unremarkable ease that you imagine tying your shoes or pouring a glass of water, you have found the end, and once you have found it, you must live there, not visit it once in a moment of inspiration and then return each morning to the old house of lack, but move your address, so to speak, pack up your attention and your feeling, and carry them fully into the new dwelling, and simply live in that finished state, as though it were the only state you have ever known, as though the old house of worry were nothing more than a place you once passed through on your way here. The fifth key is, revise every conversation about money that wounded you, because Neville taught that revision is one of the most practical tools ever given to the imagination. Most people carry, Without knowing it, dozens of old financial scenes still replaying quietly in them. The harsh word from a parent about money never being enough, spoken once decades ago, but still echoing at every purchase. The embarrassment of a bounced check in front of someone whose opinion mattered. The sting of being turned down for something you desperately wanted. The memory of a friend's careless comment about your situation that landed harder than they ever knew. These scenes are not harmless relics safely tucked away in the past. Neville taught they are still being lived in the imagination, still being rehearsed in the private theater of the mind, still confirming and reinforcing the old identity of lack every single time they replay. So each night, before you sleep, go back over your day, and wherever money was discussed with worry, sit with that scene again, but this time change it. If someone asked whether you could afford something and you felt small, imagine the whole exchange again, but hear yourself answer with ease, with warmth, without a trace of shame. Imagine their face reacting with respect instead of pity. If you remember an old moment of financial fear from years ago, a bill you could not pay, a door that closed in your face, a job that was taken from you at the worst possible time, take that memory gently into your hands like wet clay still soft enough to reshape. See the bill paid calmly. See the door opening instead of closing. See the job replaced by something better arriving just in time. This is not denial of what happened outwardly. Neville was careful to make this distinction. It is correction of what is still happening inwardly, because the past event has already done its outer work and cannot be undone in the world of fact. But the impression of it in you is still alive, still shaping your expectation of tomorrow the way an old wound still aches before a storm. And imagination does not know old from new. Felt is felt. So when you revise a memory with genuine feeling, you are not lying to yourself. You are not pretending something false. You are simply choosing which impression will keep echoing forward into your future. You are deciding, finally, which version of the past gets to keep voting on what happens next. Do this faithfully across these 3 days, taking even 5 quiet minutes each evening to walk back through the day and rewrite what stung, and you will notice something remarkable beginning to happen. The sting begins to leave the old memories one by one, quietly, without fanfare, and in its place comes a strange, settled confidence, as if the past itself has quietly agreed to stop arguing and has instead begun to support the future you are now building with such patient care. The 6th key is, enter the state Neville called the state akin to sleep, and carry your assumption through that threshold like a lantern into a dark room, because there is a moment each night, right before sleep takes you, when the reasoning mind grows quiet, the arguments fall silent, the defenses lower, and the imagination becomes most receptive, most obedient, most creative. Neville taught that this drowsy, low, relaxed state is the door through which assumptions pass most easily into fact, because in that state the critical faculty that spends the daylight hours questioning and doubting has finally gone to rest, leaving the deeper imagination undefended and open. So on each of these 3 nights, do not simply fall asleep thinking ordinary thoughts. Do not let the mind wander unattended into replaying the day's small frustrations. Prepare the moment deliberately, as a craftsman prepares the one tool that matters most. Lie still. Let the body grow heavy and warm. Let the breath slow on its own without forcing it. And in that soft edge between waking and sleeping, that narrow threshold where you are neither fully here nor fully gone, repeat quietly, without strain, without gripping, a single phrase such as, "It is done," or "Thank you," feeling the gratitude of a finished thing, not future tense, not someday, not soon, but now, already, complete. And if a small scene comes to you naturally in that drowsy state, A hand shaking yours in agreement over some deal, a check being deposited without a flicker of concern, a bill marked paid in full. Let it come uninvited and welcome it, and rest inside it as you drift, feeling it as simply and calmly as you would feel a blanket settling over you. Because in this state, the imagination is undefended, unargued with, unquestioned, and whatever is impressed upon it in that condition tends to sink down into the deeper self and take root there, the way a seed sinks into soft soil after rain. And there is one more piece to hold gently as you do this. Remember that everyone you meet in your outer life, every client, every employer, every stranger who might hand you money, every relative who might surprise you, is you, pushed out. Neville taught that the world is a mirror of consciousness, that nothing appears in the mirror that was not first assumed within, and that the very people who seem to hold your money, who seem to have the power to give or withhold it, are simply reflections of your own assumed state looking back at you. So as you fall asleep assuming wealth, feeling it as already accomplished, you are not manipulating other people, you are not scheming or forcing anyone's hand. You are quietly changing the mirror itself, and the mirror, having no independent will of its own, no choice in the matter at all, must eventually show you a different reflection, must eventually rearrange the people and circumstances of your life to match the state you have so faithfully assumed. 3 nights of this practice, sincere, unhurried, unforced, carried gently through that soft threshold of sleep, is enough to begin turning the tide, because it is not the number of days that moves the mountain, it is the depth of the feeling you carry into that soft and holy threshold where the reasoning mind lets go and the deeper imagination, which Neville called the only reality, takes over completely. Here is the whole picture. You stop feeding the old confession of lack. You replace it with an inner conversation already spoken from abundance. You understand that 3 days of patient repetition is enough to turn a pretend feeling into a settled assumption. You learn to live in the end, walking already in the scene where the money has arrived. You revise the old wounds so they no longer whisper poverty into your future. And each night you carry that finished feeling gently through the door of sleep, where imagination does its deepest and most unanswerable work, quietly, faithfully, without needing your permission or your understanding, simply because you have assumed it so. If these keys have stirred something quiet and certain in you, something that feels less like hope and more like remembering, then you are ready for the fuller path. The wish-fulfilled method was built for exactly this, a daily way of living in the end, not for 3 days only, but as a way of life, until assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled becomes as natural to you as breathing, until living in the end is no longer a technique you practice, but simply the quiet address you live at. Consider it your next home, the place where this practice becomes permanent, where the mountain, once and for all, stays cast into the sea. And so once more, gently, with full feeling, say it with me, I am the awareness in which money appears. I am at rest in the feeling of having already received. Imagination creates my reality. Again, I am the awareness in which money appears. I am at rest in the feeling of having already received. Imagination creates my reality. Speak to yourself like this, faithfully, tenderly, for these 3 days, and watch how quietly, how naturally, it is already done.